Now we have the privilege to invite Dr. Ng to lead us for 10 minutes of meditation.
For the next 10 minutes, let us make a determination that these 10 minutes of our life shall be committed to the triple gem. We shall put aside all the thoughts we have related to the past or the future. For the next 10 minutes, we shall be mindful. Let us begin by putting our mind on the top of our head. Feel the sensation of our skin and the muscles on our scalp. Feeling the texture, the temperature, the weight, even the very tiny movements on the skin of our head. Focus on the flowing sensation, the softness, the lightness of the muscles as we feel the skin and the muscles down to our face. Feeling the tone of the muscles relaxing around the eyes, the flowing of the muscles around the eyes, flowing, relaxing, allowing the facial muscles to recoil into its most natural, unhindered, relaxed positions. And feel the muscles at the back of our head flowing down to the sides, flowing down on our cheek, flowing. So with the eyes closed, the face is natural. Especially around the jaw, let the muscles relax naturally. Neck, allowing the neck to recoil to its natural position when all the muscles are relaxed. Keeping ourselves alert out of respect for the triple gem, but otherwise rest. Feel the muscles flowing at our shoulders, flowing, softening, releasing the tension. At our arms, allowing the weight of both arms to gravitate naturally all the way to our elbows, our forearms, our hands, and feel the muscles flowing as if they are melting and dripping off the fingertips. Feel the muscles at our chest, in front and at the back, releasing all its tension, very soft, very natural, without controlling, without participating. Just let the lungs breathe naturally, freely. And feel the muscles at our abdomen and the back of the lower back. Soft and natural. And all the organs in the abdomen resting, one on top of the other. like cushions in a cabinet. And feel the muscles around our pelvis, soft, relaxed. Seated comfortably, anchored at the base of the abdomen, the center of our gravity. And feel all the muscles at our thighs, soft, flowing, relaxed. In our knees, and our calves, and our feet, flowing, melting, as if all the muscles on the body are flowing and melting off onto the floor, leaving behind a set of perfectly white skeleton. We can perceive our skeleton as if we are a third person observing a person seated on a cushion, only a set of skeleton. The mind is everywhere and here, observing, appreciating, perceiving a set of skeleton. Almost white, off-white, a bit gray, with lots of roughness on the surface. You can see the eye socket, the ear holes, the jaw bones, and all the neck bones, the rib cage, and bones in the arms and the forearms, and the spinal cord, the vertebral column, and all the bones in our lower limbs. As the mind becomes an observer, we realize this is just a set of skeletons clothed in flesh and skin before even the clothing, everything else. And the skeleton holding everything up, keeping the internal organs in place, moving around, eating and consuming in order to have the energy to move around, eating and consuming. At the same time, pursuing the happiness of sensual pleasures until one day aging and sickness happen. Fully with the teachings of the Buddha, may the mind always stay wholesome, avoiding the unwholesome, keeping the precepts, practicing dharana, practicing meditation. And may the mind one day realize Nibbana and make an end of this samsara. Let us visualize ourselves again and send love to ourselves. May we be peaceful and happy. And may all my friends be peaceful and happy. And may all beings in this whole universe be peaceful and happy. And realize samsara the driving force of samsara, nibbana, in the way leading to nibbana. We may open our eyes at our own time. Good morning, brothers and sisters in the Dhamma. Today I will share with one and all my reading of the Kalama Sutta and some of the research that I did. There are altogether 50 slides, so it's actually quite a long talk. I'm not sure whether it's recorded on Zoom. So this is okay. Julian, if you cannot hear me, let me know.
Okay.
So it's I'm going to share the Kalama Sutta. I'll read the whole sutta, but along the way, I will point out the structure and also some of the comments made by Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi as he translated the sutta. Because I referenced his translation. There are many translations of the suttas. So I shall read the sutta. So, on one occasion, the Blessed One was wandering on tour among the Kosalans, together with a large sangha of monks when he reached the town of the Kalamas named Kesaputta. The Kalamas of Kesaputta heard. It is said that the ascetic Gautama, the son of the Sakyans, who went from a Sakyan family, has arrived at Kesaputta. Now a good report about that Master Gautama has circulated thus. That Blessed One is an Arahant, perfectly enlightened. So that's the episode that we've just chanted. And reveals a spiritual life that is perfectly complete and pure. Now it is good to see such Arahants. Then the Kalamas of Kesaputta approached the Blessed One. Some paid homage to the Blessed One and sat down to one side. Some kept silent and sat down to one side. Sitting to one side, the Kalamas said to the Blessed One, Pante, there are some ascetics and Brahmins who come to Kesaputta. They explain and elucidate their own doctrines, but disparage, denigrate, deride, and denounce the doctrines of others. But then some other ascetics and Brahmins come to Kesaputta, and they too explain and elucidate their own doctrines, but disparage, denigrate, deride, and denounce the doctrine of others. We are perplexed and in doubt, Bhante, as to which of these good ascetics speak truth and which speak falsehood. So the first part are the 10 inadequate sources of knowledge. And the Buddha continued, it is fitting for you to be perplexed, Kalamas, fitting for you to be in doubt. Doubt has arisen in you about a perplexing matter. So here there is some notes from the translator. I will share after this slide. Come, Kalamas, do not go by oral tradition, by lineage of teaching, by hearsay, by a collection of scriptures, by logical reasoning, by inferential reasoning, by reasoned cogitation, by the acceptance of a view after pondering it, by the seeming competence of a speaker, or because you think the ascetic is our guru. A second annotation here. But when, Kalamas, you know for yourselves, these things are unwholesome, these things are blameworthy, these things are censured by the wise, these things, if accepted and undertaken, lead to harm and suffering, then you should abandon them. So the explanation from Bhikkhu Bodhi, the translator, it highlighted the difference between the Nikaya and the Agama. So Agama are the Chinese, are from Chinese texts, 大藏经. So there's a collection in the 大藏经, which is very close with the Nikaya. So they are called the Agama. So the Majjhima Nikaya corresponds with Madhya Agama, right? So let's hear the first one, where it is related to doubt. So there are some differences with the equivalent in the Chinese Madhyagama. In Madhyagama, the Blessed One said, Kalamas, do not give rise to doubt and uncertainty. For what reason? Because when there is doubt and uncertainty, there will arise perplexity, Kalamas. You yourselves do not have pure wisdom with which to know whether there is an afterlife or not. You yourselves do not have pure wisdom about what deeds are transgressions and what deeds are not transgressions. Okay, so it's a bit different. In the Nikaya, the Buddha says, it is right that you have doubt. Okay, but in the Agama, it says, there is doubt and uncertainty because you don't see things as they really are. You do not know whether there's a life, afterlife, and so on. Right? The second one is related to the 10 inadequate sources of knowledge. They are divided into 3 categories. Oral tradition, lineage, hearsay, collection of scriptures are related to traditional sources of knowledge. Then there is logical cogitation, the 4 types of reasoning based on hypothetical premises. So let's look at it again. So in the previous slide, it says, by logical reasoning, by inferential reasoning, by reasoned cogitation, by the acceptance of a view after pondering it. So these 4 are related to reasoning, related to rational thinking, related to logic, related to inferences, and reasoned intellectual thinking. So these are the 4 types related to reasoning. And then 2C, personal authority, is related to charisma and related to the fact that this person is my guru. Okay, so these are the 10 inadequate sources of knowledge. In the Madhya Agama, these are not present. Okay, actually, I should have put my personal note. My personal note is that when you read a sutta, you need to know where's the source. Okay, so there's a difference between the Agama and the Nikaya. Part 2, the reflections of the Kalamas. What do you think, Kalamas, when greed arises in a person? Is it for his welfare or for his harm? For his harm, Bhante. Kalamas, a greedy person overcome by greed, with mind obsessed by it, destroys life, takes what is not given, transgresses with another's wife, and speaks falsehood, and he encourages others to do likewise. Would that lead to his harm and suffering for a long time? Yes, Bhante. What do you think, Kalamas, when hatred arises in a person? Is it for his welfare or for his harm? For his harm, Bhante. Kalamas, a person who is full of hate, overcome by hate, with mind obsessed by it, destroys life, and he encourages others to do likewise. Would that lead to his harm and suffering for a long time? Yes, Bhante. What do you think, Kalamas, when delusion arises in a person? Is it for his welfare or for his harm? For his harm, Bhante. Kalamas, a person who is deluded, overcome by delusion, with mind obsessed by it, destroys life, and he encourages others to do likewise. Would that lead to his harm and suffering for a long time? Yes, Bhante. So we can see that when the Buddha talked about greed, hatred, delusion, he uses as a basis of breaking the precepts, like destroys life, take what is not given, transgresses with another wife, speaks all falsehood. Drinking alcohol and intoxicants is not part of this, but we know why the 5th precept is there, because when you drink and be intoxicated, you can break the previous 4. So it is, the greed, hatred, delusion is the basis of breaking precepts here. So comments from Bhikkhu Bodhi again. The Buddha is not just telling them the 10 sources of unreliable, the 10 sources of imperfect knowledge, 10 imperfect sources of knowledge, okay? But he also subtly tell them, guide them towards precepts, okay? So according to the Buddha, greed, hatred, and delusion are the 3 unwholesome roots which underlie all immoral conduct and all default states of mind. The Buddha subtly leads the Kalama to affirm his teachings by reflecting on their own experience. What do you think, Kalamas? Are these teachings wholesome or unwholesome? Unwholesome, Bhante. Blameworthy or blameless? Blameworthy, Bhante. Censured or praised by the wise? Censured by the wise, Bhante. Accepted and undertaken, do they lead to harm and suffering or not? Or how do you take it? Accepted and undertaken, these things lead to harm and suffering, so we take it. Thus, Kalamas, when we said, come, Kalamas, do not go by oral tradition, etc. But when we know for yourselves, these things are unwholesome, these things are blameworthy, these things are censured by the wise, these things, if undertaken and practiced, lead to suffering and harm, then you should abandon them. It is because of this that this was said. So you can see the Buddha asked them and then they answered rightly. And it does show that the Kalamas have good intuitive knowledge that is aligned with the Buddha. Come, Kalamas, do not go by oral tradition, by lineage of teaching, by hearsay, by a collection of scriptures, by logical reasoning, by inferential reasoning, by reasoned cogitation, by the acceptance of a view after pondering it, by the seeming competence of a speaker, or because you think the ascetic is our guru. But when you know for yourselves, these things are wholesome, these things are blameless, these things are praised by the wise, these things, if accepted and undertaken, lead to welfare and happiness, then you should live in accordance with them. Okay? What do you think, Kalamas? When non-greed arises in a person, is it for his welfare or for his harm? For his welfare, Bhante. Kalamas, a person without greed, not overcome by greed, his mind not obsessed by it, does not destroy life, take what is not given, transgress with another's wife, or speak falsehood, nor does he encourage others to do likewise. Will that lead to his welfare and happiness for a long time? Yes, Bhante. What do you think, Kalamas? When non-hatred arises in a person, is it for his welfare or for his harm? For his welfare, Bhante. Kalamas, a person who is without hate, not overcome by hatred, his mind not obsessed by it, does not destroy life, nor does he encourage others to do likewise. Would that lead to his welfare and happiness for a long time? Yes, Bhante. What do you think, Kalamas? When non-delusion arises in a person, is it for his welfare or for his harm? For his welfare, Bhante. Kalamas, a person who is undeluded, not overcome by delusion, his mind not obsessed by it, does not destroy life, nor does he encourage others to do likewise. Would that lead to his welfare and happiness for a long time? Yes, Bhante. It is interesting to note that the Buddha says, when non-greed arises, rather than when greed doesn't arise. He also said when non-hatred arises, rather than when hatred does not arise, when non-delusion arises, rather than when delusion does not arise. Later, I'll explain why. So, non-greed, non-hatred, and non-delusion are bases of keeping precepts. The Kalamas have good intuition again. What do you think, Kalamas? Are these things wholesome or unwholesome? Wholesome, Bhante. Blameworthy or blameless? Blameless, Bhante. Censured or praised by the wise? Praised by the wise, Bhante. Accepted and undertaken, do they lead to welfare and happiness or not? Or how do you take it? Accepted and undertaking, these things lead to welfare and happiness, so we take it. Thus, Kalamas, when we said, come, Kalamas, do not go by oral tradition, etc. But when you know for yourself, these things are wholesome, these things are blameless, These things are praised by the wise. These things, if accepted and undertaken, lead to welfare and happiness. Then you should live in accordance with them. It is because of this that this was said. So again, it shows that the Kalamas have good intuitive knowledge. The third part, the Buddha went on to explain the four Brahma Vihara. Then Kalamas, that noble disciple who is thus devoid of longing, devoid of ill will, unconfused, clearly comprehending, ever mindful, dwells pervading one quarter with a mind imbued with loving kindness, with a mind imbued with compassion, with a mind imbued with altruistic joy, with a mind imbued with equanimity. Likewise, the second quarter, the third quarter, and the fourth quarter, thus above, below, and everywhere, and to all as to himself, he dwells pervading the entire world with a mind imbued with equanimity, vast, exalted, measureless, without enmity, without ill will. So we know that the four Brahma Viharas are the practice of samatha, which is part of the purification of the mind. So could the Buddha be conducting a guided meditation in front of the Kalamas? Part 4, the four assurances. The noble disciples, Kalamas, whose mind in this way, without enmity, without ill will, undefiled and pure, has won 4 assurances in this very life. The first assurance he has won is this: if there is another world, and if there is fruit and result of good and bad deeds, it is possible that with the breakup of the body after death, I will be reborn in a good destination, in a heavenly world. The second assurance he has won is this: if there is no other world, and there is no fruit and result of good and bad deeds, still right here in this very life, I maintain myself in happiness, without enmity and ill will, free from trouble. The third assurance he has won is this: suppose evil comes to one who does evil, then when I have no evil intentions toward anyone, how can suffering afflict me, since I do no evil? The fourth assurance he has won is this: suppose evil does not come to one who does evil, then right here, I see myself purified in both respects. So there's 2 more footnotes that I will explain. The noble disciple, Kalamas, whose mind in this way, without enmity, without ill will, undefiled and pure, has won these 4 assurances in this very life. That's 6. Okay, so the 4 assurances that come with wholesome speech, body, and mind, and avoiding unwholesome body, speech, and mind. Nibbana is not one of the assurances, so it's something worth noting. Okay, so Venerable Bodhi commented that it can be counterintuitive. If greed if good things happen to good people, then I'm assured. Okay, and evil happens to evil people, I'm also assured. It's counterintuitive because apparently there are many examples of bad things happen to good people, right? But how come the Kalamas know that good things happen to good people? So that is interesting, right? And then in the commentarial text from the Majjhima Nikaya, it explained that since I do no evil, and it is not done to me, it is done to one who does evil. But so this is related to the part where you are purified both ways. You can see that the 4 assurances is structured like this. The first 2 are related to doing good. The second 2 are related to doing evil. In the first 2, the first assurance is related to if karma is right. Good happens to good. The second assurance is even if karma isn't true, okay, I will still be good. The third assurance is related to if karma is true, evil befalls on the evil person. And then the fourth assurance is even if karma is not true, evil does not befall on evil person. So it's the fourth assurance that the Buddha mentioned in the sutta, that I am pure in both ways. And this is where the commentary text is trying to explain, because pure in both ways, in what both way? So in the commentary text to the Nikaya, which is the Singhali sources from Buddhaghosa, from Sri Lankan, the Theravada source. Okay. Since I do no evil, it is not done to me, and it is done to one who does evil. So I do no evil, and I don't have any evil before upon me. So I'm pure in two ways. Okay. However, from the Chinese Madhyama Agama, it is said that purified in both respects mean not doing any evil deeds and having a pure mind, because I'm practicing the four Brahma Vihara. So even if karma doesn't work, I don't do evil deeds and I'm purified with four Brahma Vihara. So I'm pure in two ways. So it does shows that there are different interpretations of the four assurance. And then the last one, the Bhikkhu Bodhi explained in detail what are these four assurances in today's language. Okay. If there is evil, if there is this world and other world, and results of good and bad deeds, I acquire karma connected with this right view. After that, I will certainly go to a good state, even in the heavenly realm. So A is actually the Buddha's teachings, law of karma. C as well. C is if anything is done, certainly I do no evil. I think nothing evil. Since I do no evil, how can suffering arise for me? So A and C are related to right view. B and D are a person who doesn't subscribe to the law of karma. Even if there isn't this world or the next, no results of good or bad deeds, I cannot be blamed, and I will be praised by the wise if this is the only life we have. And D, if anything is done, certainly I do no evil. I do not transgress against what is fearful and not fearful in the world. I always have love and compassion for the whole world. My mind has no belligerence towards sentient beings. It is without stains, joyful and happy. Even if the law of karma doesn't work and there's no future after this life. So these are the four assurances. So it is, blessed one. So it is, fortunate one. This noble disciple whose mind is in this way without enmity, without ill will, undefiled and pure, has won four assurances in this very life. The first assurance he has won as above down to the fourth assurance. He has won. Okay. Suppose evil does not befall the evildoer, then right here I see myself purified in both respects. This noble disciple Bhante, whose mind in this way without enmity, without ill will, undefiled and pure, has won these four assurances in this very life. Excellent Bhante, we go for refuge to the Blessed One, to Dhamma, and to the Sangha of the Bhikkhus. Let the Blessed One consider us lay followers who from today have gone for refuge for life. So my own notes here is that the Buddha is a skillful teacher. He was able to convince a group of very critical thinkers, that even without knowing for yourself about law of karma, keeping precepts and four Brahma Vihara is good for you. And they are happy with it and they come for refuge. After they come for refuge, maybe they have a chance to realize the path. Okay. Now I will just share some discussion and reflections. So lessons from the Kalama Sutta. So we know that from oral tradition, lineage of teaching, hearsay and collection of scriptures is not perfect. Why? Because if it could be a case of the blind leading the blind if we just follow tradition. And we know very well about the echo chamber effect. Birds of the same feathers, especially if you enjoy listening to people whose views agree with yours, you will like the post. And then you always get them. And then in the end, you have an echo chamber effect. Okay. And also, to a lot of science students, we find that the second group of imperfect knowledge is not completely understandable because we abide by reasoning. We always swear by logic and intellectual ability. But there are some faults. So the example given in the Udana, if I remember correctly, the analogy of the blind man and the elephant. Okay, the Buddha used, if a person is blind and then he were to feel an elephant to only one aspect of it, he will not get the full picture. He might have a wrong view, even if it totally depends on his sensations. So that's the bias of the blind man and the elephant. And there are many other kinds of bias. I mean, if those of you who does research, you know that there are so many kinds of bias. Sampling bias. If my sampling is biased, like for example, I do a telephone survey about people for anything, maybe what they feel about the government. So maybe those people with a fixed line, you're only calling people with a fixed line. Or you only call people who pick up the phone. Those are very busy, they don't pick up the phone, right? So there's a sampling bias and many other kinds of bias. Publication bias also. People only publish research that shows some effect. Those that don't show effect, they don't publish. Then we think there is an effect. Or people only publish research that shows a positive effect, that doesn't show negative effect. Then we also have a publication bias. So there are many kinds of bias even in scientific work. So when we make conclusion, we need to be very careful, even if we practice scientific methods. Problem with personal authority. So it's quite clear that a speaker appears to be competent, or that this person is our guru and we trust. But what's the problem with it? Maybe this person happens to be a very good orator, has the skill in salesmanship, or that he's speaking something that sounds good to you at your moment of your life, that maybe you're particularly disturbed by something happened, and this person seems to empathize with you particularly well, then we will like this particular speaker. So it can be biased because of feel good. He says something that makes you feel good. So we feel very good and then we like and then we believe. It can also be a result of branding, or it can be relationship preferences or emotional biases. So these 10 sources of knowledge, if you use modern day understanding based on the scientific tradition, which recently from Prof. Wang Gengwu's lecture, I realized, that is the civilization post-Renaissance, when there's a Renaissance, there's a revitalization of the ancient Greek philosophers, and then people become a bit more empowered, no longer believe in Almighty, and then they start to believe in human ability to think, and then gradually come up with scientific method, and we have the industrial revolution. So, if you use the modern civilization and look at the Kalama Suttas, you find that it's so agreeable, right? That you don't believe in anything just because it is traditional. You don't even believe in anything just because it is logical. You don't believe in anything just because it feels good. Okay, so this is one example. So you can look at one corner, you think that Prince William is showing the middle finger. But when you actually look at him in front, he's telling everybody he's got 4 kids, 3 kids, or whatever 3 it means. Yeah. However, if we do not go by tradition or logic or gut feel, then what do we go by? Okay, so that is the challenge I like to explore when we read the Kalama Suttas. Kalama Suttas alone is not enough. we know, right? Yeah, so I'm going to explore deeper. So challenges to straighten our views. So if you were to adopt the Kalama Suttas alone, then is scholarship in ancient scriptures and writings discouraged because they are from the scriptures? They are kind of traditional sources of knowledge. If we can only rely on our intuition, like the Kalamas, based on our practice of whether the precepts are good or bad, whether the four Brahma Vihara are good or bad, to know the truth, then how do we then know we have practiced rightly and our intuition is accurate? Can we go by what our teacher teaches in our practice? Because Kalama Suttas mentions something like, don't believe in something just because my teacher says so. Is faith necessary? Right? If blind faith is discouraged, how do we know our faith is not blind? How did the Kalama know for themselves that greed, etc., lead to suffering and non-greed lead to welfare and happiness? How did they know? I mean, did they go by faith? Because if they don't believe in the law of karma, then why did they say that greed will lead to happiness? Because it's very obvious in day-to-day life. Some people who are greedy, they enjoy a lot of wealth. And some people do evil, and yet they also enjoy wealth. So, yeah, so these are the challenges to deepen our understanding of the Buddha's teachings. So we have to use the whole Tipitaka, right, to understand the Buddha's teachings. Also, in order to look back at Kalama Suttas to understand it. So there's this first question. Is scholarship in ancient scriptures and writings discouraged? Since the Kalama Sutta says, don't go by scriptural sources. So this is a translation from Ajahn Sujato of an Anguttara Nikaya Sutta. It is called Mahachunda Sutta, where the Buddha explained that those who, okay, I'll read it to you. So you should train like this. As mendicants who practice discernment of principles, we will praise mendicants who practice absorption meditation. That's how you should train. Why is that? Because it's incredibly rare to find individuals in the world who have direct meditative experience of the deathless element. So you should train like this. As mendicants who practice absorption meditation, we will praise mendicants who practice discernment of principles. That's how you should train. Why is that? Because it's incredibly rare to find individuals in the world who see the meaning of a deep saying with penetrating wisdom. So this is a sutta whereby the Buddha was describing how certain groups of monks who like to study the teachings of the Buddha and who praise people who study and disparage people who only meditate. And there are people who only meditate. They praise people who meditate and disparage people who only study. Then the Buddha says, if you are the one who loves to study the Dhamma in details, you should praise people who practice meditation deeply, because it is rare to find people who have direct meditative experience of the deathless element, which is Nibbana. And if you are somebody who enjoy practicing meditation, you should praise people who enjoy or who engage in studying deeply the Dhamma, because it is rare to find individuals in the world who see the meaning of a deep saying with penetrative wisdom. Okay? There's another translation of the same Nikaya source. So this is from Brother Piatan. Therefore, also, you should train thus. Being those engaged in Dhamma, we will speak well of the monks who are meditators. Thus, you should train yourselves. And also, what is reason for this? Marvelous indeed, also, are these people, hard to find in the world, who dwell in the body in touch with the death-free element. So both of them translated from Pali, but there's a little bit of a difference in the phrasing. Therefore, also you should train thus. Being meditators, we will speak well of monks who are engaged in Dhamma. Thus, you should train yourselves. And also, what is the reason for this? Marvelous indeed, also, are these people hard to find in the world who have, having penetrated a deep subject with wisdom, see it rightly and beneficially. Okay, so there's some subtle difference. The thing is, if you are strict in your scholarship, you need to learn Pali. Okay, but even if you are an expert in Pali, like both of them are, Ajahn Sujato and Brother Piatan, they will have subtle differences in their interpretation. Same with Bhikkhu Bodhi. Okay, he has his own interpretation. So which one do we follow? Even if we follow the scriptures, unless you go and read the Pali, but you would have your own interpretation of the Pali words, right? So further, okay, this one is Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation of Anguttara Nikaya 8.25, which underlies the principles of the practice a lot. In what way, Bhante, is a lay follower practicing for his own welfare? Okay, this is conversation between Mahanama and Buddha. So the Buddha says, a lay follower has faith, virtues, and generosity, and wisdom. And when he talk about wisdom, he explained, listen to good Dhamma, retains in the mind the teachings and heard, and carefully examines the meaning, and practice according with the Dhamma. So, what the Buddha is saying is, you have to listen to the Dhamma. Listen in the ancient times is because they don't write things down. Okay? So you need, and in our day and age, we actually write things down. So it means you need to study the scriptures. You need to reflect on them and practice according to the scriptures. Okay? So this is what the Buddha said as translated by Bhikkhu Bodhi, as recorded in the Nikaya, which is the Pali Canon, which is slightly different from the Chinese source, the Madhya Agama, which came from the northern tradition, which the Agama obviously came from northern tradition, which is Kashmir side, which is probably Sarvastivada. So Sarvastivada, according to the Mahayana scriptures, was one of the sectarians which, if I understand correctly, the Madhyamika, the Nagarjuna, tried to refute. They did not understand the Buddha's teachings rightly. Okay, it was during the sectarian Buddha's time. So if you go by scriptural sources, you will need to deal with these influences, okay, these challenges to the, in a way, authenticity of the scripture. The scripture are authentic, but we need to have discernment. Okay. Number 2 question. If you can only rely on intuition based on our practice to know the truth, how do we then know we have practiced rightly and our intuition is accurate? Like the Kalamas, their intuition is accurate. How did it happen? Okay, so let's go back to the Buddha's teachings. This is from Anguttara Nikaya 5.51, translated by Nyanaponika Thera, who was like a mentor to Bhikkhu Bodhi, right? There are 5 impediments and hindrances. Overgrowths of the mind that stultify insight. What 5? Sensual desire is an impediment and hindrance, and overgrowth of the mind that stultifies insight. Ill will, sloth and torpor, restlessness and remorse, skeptical doubt. These are the 5 impediments and hindrances, overgrowth of the mind that stultify insight. Without having overcome these 5, it is impossible for a monk whose insight thus lacks strength and power to know his own true good, the good of others, and the good of both. Nor will he be capable of realizing that superhuman state of distinctive achievement, the knowledge and vision enabling the attainment of sanctity. So here, how do we know our intuition is accurate? It's related to whether you have the 5 hindrances. And then and in the translation by Bhikkhu Bodhi from the Samyutta Nikaya, the Buddha said, bhikkhus, develop concentration. A bhikkhu who is concentrated understands correctly. And then we know that concentration equals the suppressions of the five hindrances. So in order for intuition to be accurate, we need to suppress the five hindrances. We need to have some concentration. And this is yet another source from Majjhima Nikaya. How do we know our practice is correct? How do we know our intuition is correct? Because this is the one and the only way for the purification of the minds of beings, for overcoming sorrow and lamentation, for the cessation of physical and mental pain, for attainment of the noble paths, and for the realization of Nibbana. That only way is the four Satipatthana. So the four Satipatthana talks about meditation, right? Meditation of the body, of the feeling, of the mind objects in the framework of the Buddha's teachings. Okay? And in the mindfulness of the body, you will see samatha and vipassana here. Number 3, can we go by what our teacher teaches in our practice? Since the Kalama Sutta says, you don't go by just what your teachers say. If we don't go by what our teachers say, then why did the Buddha in Samyutta Nikaya, translated by Ajahn Thanisaro, says, when Ananda says, spiritual friendship is half of the spiritual life, the Buddha says, don't say that. Admirable friendship, as translated by Ajahn, in other places it's translated as spiritual friendship, which the Pali term is called Kalyana Mitta, right? Admirable friendship, admirable companionship, admirable camaraderie is actually the whole of the holy life. When the monk has admirable people as friends, companions, and comrades, he can be expected to develop and pursue the Noble Eightfold Path. I forgot to add, the Buddha in other places, in another sutta, says, the Buddha is the admirable friend for all beings. Okay? So the Buddha is a Kalyana Mitta. So do we need a teacher? Well, apparently it is. We do need, right? Then is faith necessary? So let's analyze the Majjhima Nikaya translated by Bhikkhu Bodhi. How does a being develop and become enlightened? The Buddha described the causation. First, there is an arising of the Tathagata in the world and his exposition of the Dhamma. Next, the disciple acquires faith, follows the teacher into homelessness, observes the rules of discipline to acquire purification of conduct and livelihood, contentment, restraint of the sense faculties, moderation in eating, wakefulness, mindfulness and clear comprehension, abandoning the five hindrances and attain concentration, insight into things as they really are, and realization of Nibbana. So this step-by-step systematic approach in understanding is everywhere in the suttas. This is Sila Samadhi Panya. This is the Noble Eightfold Path. This is described in the Samannaphala Sutta. It's described in many, many parts. Okay. Reasoning. Okay. Okay, so this one, I did not quote from any suttas. This is just using reasoning, right? If you have no faith as a basis, where do you begin to reason, right? Even as we do mathematics, we make assumptions. Then based on these assumptions, what is this, right? So where can one place our heart? Place our heart. Okay, when I was giving this talk, I was giving to, first I gave this in Buddhist library, then I gave this to our Happy Village, my group of senior friends, our, support group. Many of them are Chinese speaking, so I was giving this talk in Chinese. So place one's heart means to 放心. Chinese word 放心 is very important. If you 不放心, you're always anxious. Okay? If you have no faith, you cannot 放心. How can we believe in the scriptures or even believe in our intelligence, in thinking, in our teachers and friends? How do we know we're practicing correctly and our understanding are not biased? How can we not overthink if we do not have faith? How can we even believe in the teachings of the Kalama Suttas? So in the end, you have no belief, you will go crazy, you know. Faith is very important. We need to recognize that faith is as fundamental as our mother's love. As who was this teacher? Was it Guang Chao Fa Shi, the late Guang Chao Fa Shi? He said that no one ever need to test the DNA before we are certain that our mother is our mother. So that is faith. Yeah. We live and breathe faith. So faith is very, very important. So do not misunderstand Kalama Suttas to mean that we don't need faith. Is faith is that necessary? When is it blind? When is it not? So this is a hard question to answer, because a lot of people become Buddhists because they don't believe in blind faith. But then when they study Buddhism, then they realize that, we also need to have blind faith. How? Okay, then they feel a bit stuck. So let me explain from the Changi Sutta, the Buddha's teachings on how we know what we know and how do we know the truth. It was a very interesting sutta whereby the Buddha went to a Brahmin village, and Changi was in a way, the head of the Brahmin village. And he went together with his ministers to listen to the Buddha in the forest. When he arrived, there was a group of Brahmins having a discussion with the Buddha, and one of the Brahmins was very young, and he kept interrupting the Buddha's conversation with other more senior Brahmins. And the Buddha told him off, say that you should not interrupt the senior Brahmins. Then Chanki told the Buddha, Venerable, this young man, this young Brahmin, is actually an astounding scholar. He interrupt rightly. He's actually quite respected among us. And then the Buddha attended to him, and then this young Brahmin his name is Tipitaka, right? Tipitaka question. Then he know that he's going to ask a question, so he turned to Tipitaka, and Tipitaka said, Master Gautama, in regard to the ancient Brahmanic hymns which are the Vedas, right, that have come down through oral tradition and the scriptural collections, the Brahmins come to this definite conclusion: only this is true, anything else is wrong. What does Master Gautama say about this? So it's like a philosophical discussion now, right? Then the Buddha answered, is there even a teacher who says thus? So the Buddha was able to name all the ancient teachers, even those that Tipitaka hardly even know, right? The Buddha says, among all these ancient teachers, is there even one of them says, I know this, I see this, only this is true, anything else is wrong? No, Master Gautama. The ancient Brahmin seers, so he named the Brahmin seers, then none of them know and see and say that everything else is wrong, only I'm right. So Tipitaka said, no, Master Gautama. Suppose there were a file of blind men, each in touch with the next. The first one does not see, the middle one does not see, and the last one does not see. What do you think, Bharadwaja? That being so, does the faith of Brahmins turn out to be groundless? Okay. Then, of course, Tipitaka said yes. Then the Buddha went on to explain these 5 things: faith, approval, oral tradition, reasoned cogitation, reflective acceptance of a view. Approval means it's an intuitive approval, right? Faith, intuition, oral tradition, reason, cogitation, reflective acceptance of a view. All these 5 can be right, can also be wrong. So if you talk about these 5 and correspond with the Kalama Sutta's 10 imperfect sources of knowledge, faith and approval is similar to the last 2, okay, related to this being our teacher and also my personal preference to this person. So this is emotional. Oral tradition corresponds to the first 4 in Kalama Suttas, is based on tradition and authority. And the reason, cogitation, and reflective acceptance correspond to the Second set of four related to logical thinking, rational thinking. So all these are imperfect sources of knowledge because they can turn out to be either true or false. So it is not proper for a wise man who preserves truth to come to the definite conclusion, only this is true, anything else is wrong. So all this faith, reasoning, and based on tradition can be true, can also not be true. You cannot say only this is true, everything else is wrong, just based on these three things. Then Tipitaka further asks, but Master Gautama, in what way is there the preservation of truth? How does one preserve truth? We ask Master Gautama about preservation of truth. If a person has faith, Bharatvaja, he preserves truth when he says, my faith is thus, but he does not yet come to the definite conclusion, only this is true and everything else is wrong. Okay? But he doesn't, I won't read this, but he says that this is how you preserve truth, but this is not yet the discovery of the truth. Similarly, approval, oral tradition, reasoned cogitation, reflective acceptance of the truth, view. If you want to preserve truth, you can say, I think this is true because intuitively I believe in it. Okay? I think this is true because it comes from this scripture. I think this is true because I think about it now because of the time like that and this like that. So based on what this and that says, this should be true. Then you are preserving the truth. So similarly, when we write scientific papers, when we do conclusion, we always write assumptions and caveats, right? Then Tipitaka is tickled. Now talk about preservation of truth. And you say, this is not yet discovery of truth. How do I discover the truth? Then the Buddha explained the discovery of truth. First, you investigate a bhikkhu, whether this bhikkhu can be a teacher. Next, you place your faith. Then you visit, you pay respect, you give ear, you hear the Dhamma, you memorize the Dhamma, you examine the meaning of the teachings, you gain a reflective acceptance, you arouse your zeal, and you apply your will, and you scrutinize the phenomena as taught, and you strive, and you realize the ultimate truth, and see it by penetrating it with wisdom. So that's how you discover the truth. On the investigation of the teacher, the Buddha explained, you investigate based on three states, greed, hate, and delusion, such that you observe the behavior of the teacher, the bodily behavior, and the speech, because you cannot read the mind. So based on this speech and based on this bodily behavior, over time, is there any signs of being obsessed by these things, such that the teacher may say, I know and see certain things when he actually does not, and urge others to act in a way that will lead to harm? Or is the teacher, based on your observation, purified from greed, hatred, and delusion? The bodily behavior, the verbal behavior are not those of one affected by greed. The Dhamma he teaches is profound, hard to see, hard to understand, peaceful and sublime, unattainable by mere reasoning, subtle, to be experienced by the wise. This Dhamma cannot easily be taught by one affected by greed. So, truthful, consistent, and wise, not affected by greed, hatred, and delusions. So the investigation of a teacher, you still use the principle of greed, hatred, and delusion, right? Why do you use this greed, hatred, and delusion? That one depends on whether do you believe that greed, hatred, and delusion is the yardstick. And when you investigate, you cannot read mind, you can only observe behaviors. So observing behaviors, okay, is almost like a guessing game because we cannot read minds. So you need to observe over a long time, right? And then it says, this teaching is profound, hard to see, unattainable by mere reasoning, subtle to be experienced otherwise. If you're not yet wise, how do you know this teaching is true, unattainable? So in this description, there is a mix of investigation, intuition, and faith, right? Anyway, I am adding my thoughts into this. But you read this, you understand, no? You have to investigate. You need to spend time. You need to use your own, whatever wisdom you have. Where does this wisdom come from? It's really a long story. It is samsara, okay, your past parami. Okay, in this way, we describe the discovery of the truth, but as yet, there is no final arrival at truth. Oh, then the Buddha actually leading him further. You discover the truth, but not yet arrive at the truth. Then Tipitaka says, how do you arrive at the truth? The Buddha says, it's the same repetition, from faith all the way to arrival. Okay. So the thing most helpful for final arrival, Tipitaka asks, what is most helpful? Is to strive, scrutinize, apply the will. So what is most helpful for application of the will? It is zeal. What is most helpful for zeal is reflective acceptance. Because once you accept, you have energy. But how do you arrive at acceptance? Because you examine the meaning. How do you arrive at examining the meaning? Because you memorize the teaching. How do you memorize the teaching? Because you hear the Dhamma. How do you hear the Dhamma? Because you paid attention. How do you pay attention? Because you're respectful. Why were you respectful? Because you put in effort to come. Why did you put in effort to come? Because you had faith. So this is how you arrive at the truth. It began with faith. So points to note from Kalama Sutta. We don't arrive at the truth by merely having faith or by merely having intellectual reflection. Both faith and investigation are necessary along the path. Faith and investigation alone are still not yet enough. One needs to put the learning into practice to discover the truth. So we go back to the Kalama Suttas using teachings from the Abhidhamma. I still have one question I haven't answered, which is how did the Kalama knows that is the truth, right? If they are so rational. Anyway, I'll talk about Abhidhamma first. By oral tradition, by lineage of teaching, or because you think that ascetics are guru, will not lead to the Four Noble Truths, because to see things as they really are, the five hindrances must be suppressed. Without suppressing the five hindrances, oral tradition, lineage thinking, all these will not lead to the truth. Greed, aversion, delusion, and non-greed, non-aversion, and non-delusion are all mental factors. That's why the Buddha talk about the arising of non-greed, arising of non-aversion. The rising of non-greed is equal to the arising of aloba, or rising of contentment. Non-aversion is the same as adosa, which is acceptance. It is a mental factor by itself. Okay? Unless one is an arahant, actions based on these will generate karma. We know that in the Abhidhamma is really all the teachings, but distilled, right? Distilled teachings of the Buddha. If you have not eradicated delusion, will generate karma. Greed can be associated with happiness or neutral feelings. Okay, this is Abhidhamma teachings. Greed, you can check when you're eating with attachment. Are you suffering? At that moment, there is no aversion mind. There is no unpleasant feeling. There may be restlessness. Okay, if you regard suffering as unpleasant feeling, at that moment there's no suffering. But if you regard suffering as all form of sankhara, of course there is suffering. Even when you are meditating, there is suffering. Okay? Because if you regard suffering as all sankhara. So it is remarkable that Kalamas know intuitively that greed is blameworthy and lead to harm and suffering. To say that an unwholesome mind leads to suffering, the Kalamas either have faith in the law of karma or have direct insight into it. Insights into dependent origination across lifetimes. So the Kalamas are able to say that greed leads to suffering when greed does not cause unpleasant feeling. That means they may have faith. Where did their faith come from? Or they have direct insight. How did they have direct insight? By just listening to the Buddha. So this one is a question mark. We can only put forth educated guess. Okay? One way to understand it is, where does the faith come from? The Kalamas might have been influenced by the Indian teachings of the day, the law of karma. Or, so influence that they have faith in the law of karma. Or that their life experience shows that greed leads to suffering. Okay? Or that their faith comes from intuition that is deep-seated, as old as samsara, in the form of past lives paramis, past lives practices. How can they have insight then and then if they don't have faith? The possibility is this: when you are in front of the Buddha, it's different. Okay, the Buddha had very powerful metta, can affect the way your mind position itself. And then when you have very deep metta in front of the Buddha, your hindrances are suppressed, and then you can have insights immediately. So these are all postulations. Okay. The practice of the four Brahma Vihara is a samatha practice, where the mind can be purified and absorbed into deep samadhi, suppressing the hindrances. So if they have got the four Brahma Vihara, their mind become very pure. Samadhi is a foundation for seeing ultimate realities of the five aggregates and their causes in various ways across time and space. That is the base practice of insight meditation. So it could be possible that the Buddha guided them into four Brahma Vihara, emerged from it, and all of them are very deep in concentration. And the Buddha talked to them about the four assurances. And then they have so much insight and they have strong faith. For those who have faith or insights into the law of karma, they will be assured. If they restrain from evil, do good, purify the mind always, they are fine. Okay, their life is fine and their future is safe. Last slide. Summary. For beginners, we cultivate faith in the triple gems by studying the Buddha's teachings in the company of Kalyana Mitta. We should study the scriptures widely, not just from the Sutta Pitaka, but also from the Vinaya and the Abhidhamma, as well as their commentaries. After a period of searching and investigating, we need to rely on a teacher to guide us on the practice, because the practice is applied and skill-based. We cannot always sit on the fence. Because it is skill-based, our teacher cannot be a lecturer. Our teacher has to be a master when we are like an apprentice. The teacher becomes like a preceptor, like a mentor. Gradually, we focus mainly on our practice as we deepen our understanding. Because you see from Changi Sutta, once you have faith, you pay attention, you listen, you memorize, you reflect, accept, you apply zeal, and the rest is striving. Okay? You need to put into practice. The middle way is also about balancing emotions and intellect, faith and wisdom, sharpening our right view, and taking the plunge of putting theories into practice, overcoming all obstacles without giving up. So the middle way is about aesthetic practice, austerism, versus indulgence in sensual pleasures. That is the middle way of the behavior and speech, right? Middle way of the practice is taught in the Majjhima Nikaya in the balancing of the five faculties. Faith, energy, faith, energy, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. Faith and wisdom need to balance. The emotional and the intellect need to balance. So you practice meditation also in the middle way. And when we practice meditation in the middle way, we will sharpen our right view and we take the plunge. Why? Because the practice is not easy. If you have no faith, you will stop halfway because some periods of our practice only suffering. Okay? And you need to have faith. It's like climbing a hill. It's suffering, but you know this is a hill. It's different from, it's also, okay, it's like crossing a desert. You need to have faith that that is the right direction. Otherwise, you will stop. Okay? Then finally, you arrive at the middle view. The middle view is neither eternalism nor nihilism, creationism nor dust to dust, ashes to ashes. Everything is nothing. Okay? So both of these are wrong views, and the middle view is dependent origination. Okay, that's all for the long talk, more than an hour.